The town of Red Hollow had learned to gather quietly when something important was about to happen. On that hot afternoon, the wooden boardwalk filled without anyone calling for it. Boots stopping, voices lowering, eyes turning toward the open square near the feed store. Everyone knew the rancher named Caleb Hart. He was steady, widowed, and known for doing right even when it cost him. They also knew Leila Marino, the young woman standing near the well with her hands clenched, her face pale but proud. When she said softly, "Please, don't do that," her words carried farther than shouting ever could. Caleb heard them clearly, yet he did not stop. He stepped forward anyway, every movement calm, deliberate, and certain, as if he had already accepted whatever judgment the town might place on him. People whispered that he had no right, that it was not his place, that the past should be left alone. But Caleb had never believed that silence was the same as peace, and today he was done watching wrongs survive just because they were familiar. Leila's story was one the town preferred to ignore. Years earlier, her family had lost their land through lies and pressure, pushed aside by men with papers and power. She stayed behind, working, surviving, never complaining, never asking for help. Now those same men had returned, claiming more, threatening to take even her small home. Leila begged Caleb not to involve himself, not because she feared him, but because she feared what the town would do to him. Caleb listened, truly listened, then shook his head. He said some things were heavier than reputation. He walked to the courthouse steps and unfolded old documents he had spent months tracking down, records buried and forgotten. He read them aloud so everyone could hear, naming names, dates, and lies. Gasps moved through the crowd. Faces hardened. Others softened. Caleb's voice never shook. When he finished, he did the shocking thing. He tore up his own ranch deed copy and declared part of his land transferred back to Lila's family name, restoring what had been stolen long before. The town froze, stunned by a sacrifice no one expected. Leila felt the ground tilt beneath her. She had asked him not to do it, not to give up something so valuable, not to draw this kind of attention. Tears burned her eyes, not from shame, but from the weight of being seen. Caleb turned to her then, not as a savior, but as a man who had made a choice. He told her she owed him nothing, not loyalty, not gratitude, not affection. He said justice was not a bargain, it was a duty. The crowd murmured, unsure how to respond. Some men looked away. Others nodded slowly. The sheriff stepped forward at last and confirmed the documents were real. The balance of the town shifted in that moment. Leila realized the shock was not just about land, but about courage. For the first time, she felt something loosen inside her chest, a knot she had carried for years beginning to release. In the days that followed, Red Hollow buzzed with argument and awe. Caleb became the subject of every conversation. Some called him reckless, others called him honorable. Leila stayed quiet, focusing on her work, but her world had changed. Caleb did not hover or intrude. He returned to his ranch, repairing fences, tending cattle, letting his actions stand without explanation. One evening, Leila rode out to see him. She wanted to understand the man who had altered her future without asking for anything in return. They talked as equals, sitting on the fence line as the sun dipped low. Caleb admitted he had acted because he could no longer accept comfort built on someone else's loss. Leila told him she was afraid to trust kindness again. He said trust was not demanded, only offered. Something steady and warm began to form between them, not romance yet, but respect deep enough to carry it. By the end of the week, the town had adjusted, as towns always do. Life moved on, but not unchanged. Leila stood taller, her name spoken with new respect. Caleb carried the quiet knowledge that he had done what was right, regardless of cost. When they crossed paths, there was an understanding between them that did not need words. The shock that had frozen Red Hollow had cracked something open instead. Justice had been spoken aloud. Choice had been honored. And though neither of them could see it yet, that single act of courage had set a path neither would ever walk alone again. Red Hollow did not forget what Caleb Hart had done, but it did learn how to live with it. The shock settled into the cracks of daily life, changing how people spoke and what they allowed themselves to believe. Some avoided Caleb out of discomfort. Others greeted him with quiet respect. Leila Moreno felt the change most of all. Doors opened more easily. Voices softened when speaking her name. Still, she carried unease inside her, because kindness that arrived suddenly could also disappear. She worked harder than ever, tending her small plot, repairing her home, and refusing to lean on what Caleb had given her. Pride mattered now more than survival. Caleb watched from a distance, careful not to cross lines he had promised to respect. He knew Leila needed space to stand on her own ground, even ground he had helped restore. Yet he could not deny the pull he felt toward her, not born from heroism or gratitude, but from shared understanding. They had both lost things and learned to endure. That recognition lingered whenever they met, brief conversations stretching longer than intended, silences growing comfortable instead of awkward. The town noticed, but no one spoke openly. Red Hollow had learned its lesson about assumptions. One afternoon, trouble returned in a quieter form. A group of investors arrived, men with polished boots and sharp smiles, claiming legal interest in land surrounding Lila's property. Their paperwork was clean, their manners practiced. They did not threaten her directly. Instead, they offered to buy her out, smiling as if generosity covered intention. Leila refused politely, but the pressure remained. Caleb heard of it, and struggled with his promise not to interfere. He rode out to her place that evening, not to act, but to warn. Leila listened, jaw tight, and thanked him. She said she would handle it herself. Caleb respected that, though worry stayed with him like a shadow. Days later, the investors returned with a lawyer and a deadline. Leila felt fear rise, sharp and familiar. That night, she rode to Caleb's ranch without planning to. She told him everything, not asking for rescue, but for counsel. Caleb did not rush. He laid out options, risks, and consequences, treating her as an equal partner in decision. Together, they found a flaw in the claim, a small inconsistency that could unravel the deal if challenged properly. It would take time, money, and public confrontation. Leila hesitated, knowing the cost. Caleb offered help, but only if she chose it freely. After a long silence, she said yes. They prepared carefully. Leila gathered records. Caleb spoke to the sheriff and a judge he trusted. When the case came before the town council, Leila stood alone to speak, her voice steady despite the weight of eyes on her. Caleb sat among the crowd, silent support rather than shield. The investors argued smoothly, but the flaw held. The council ruled in Leila's favor. The men left angry, their power checked by truth and resolve. The room erupted in applause. Leila felt something she had never known before, not relief, but confidence earned through her own strength. Afterward, she found Caleb outside. She thanked him, then surprised them both by embracing him. It was brief, sincere, and unguarded. Caleb returned it gently, aware of how much that trust meant. From that moment, something shifted. They no longer pretended distance was necessary. They began to share more time openly, writing together, planning improvements, discussing futures without naming them. Romance grew quietly, rooted in respect rather than drama. The town watched again, but this time without judgment. People saw two adults choosing each other carefully. When gossip surfaced, it faded quickly. Red Hollow had learned to recognize real change. One evening, during a community gathering, Leila laughed freely for the first time since anyone could remember. Caleb saw it and felt a deep certainty settle in him. Whatever came next, he would meet it honestly. As summer deepened, Caleb invited Leila to help with a long-neglected pasture on the far ridge. The work was hard, but the view wide and calming. They rested there, talking about dreams once set aside. Leila admitted she had never allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival. Caleb confessed he had buried his own hopes after loss. Speaking them aloud felt like opening windows in rooms long closed. One night, a storm rolled in fast. They took shelter in an old cabin. Rain drummed on the roof, thunder close. Layla shivered, memories stirring. Caleb offered his coat, his presence steady. She spoke of nights spent afraid, of begging that changed nothing. Caleb listened, anger controlled, sorrow shared. He told her she never had to beg again, not for safety, not for respect, not for love. Layla looked at him then, really looked, and saw not a rescuer, but a partner who understood boundaries because he honored them. When the storm passed, they stepped outside together. The air smelled clean, renewed. Layla reached for Caleb's hand, this time without fear. He accepted, aware of the weight and the gift of that choice. They did not speak. They did not need to. Red Hollow slept below them, unaware that something stronger than shock had taken root. By the time they rode home, both knew the truth they had not yet spoken. What began as an act that stunned a town had grown into something steady and real. The road ahead would not be easy, but it would be walked together, one honest step at a time. Autumn arrived with cooler mornings and longer shadows, settling gently over Red Hollow, as if the land itself were pausing to watch what would happen next. Caleb and Layla moved through their days with growing ease, their connection no longer hidden, yet never performed for others. They worked together often now, repairing fences, checking water lines, sharing meals beneath open skies. The town adjusted to their presence as a pair, not with gossip, but with acceptance shaped by time and proof. Trust, once broken so easily, was rebuilding slowly, the way strong things always do. Layla felt stronger in ways she had never known before. Standing up to the investors had changed something deep within her. She no longer doubted her voice or her right to use it. Still, fear had not vanished completely. Some nights she woke restless, old memories stirring like distant thunder. Caleb never pushed. When she spoke, he listened. When she stayed silent, he stayed near. That patience mattered more than grand promises. Love, she was learning, could be quiet and still powerful. The town council announced a fall gathering to celebrate harvest and renewal. It would be the first public event since the confrontation months earlier. Some wondered if tension would rise again. Others hoped it would mark a turning point. Caleb asked Layla if she wished to attend together. He made it clear there was no obligation. Layla thought carefully, then agreed. She wanted to stand openly now, not hidden by fear or rumor. The evening of the gathering, lanterns glowed along the square, music soft and welcoming. Layla arrived beside Caleb, her head high, her steps confident. Conversations paused, then resumed. Smiles appeared, genuine and warm. Neighbors greeted her by name. Caleb felt pride, not possessive, but respectful of her strength. They shared food, laughter, and stories, blending naturally into the life of the town. Later, the sheriff called for quiet. He spoke about change, about how Red Hollow had faced hard truths and chosen a better path. He acknowledged Caleb's courage and Layla's resolve, not as spectacle, but as example. The crowd applauded, not loudly but sincerely. Layla felt emotion rise, not embarrassment, but gratitude. She squeezed Caleb's hand, grounding herself in the present. As the night deepened, music picked up and couples danced beneath the stars. Caleb asked Layla if she wished to dance. She smiled and said yes. They moved slowly, simply, guided by rhythm rather than skill. It felt right, unforced, shared. Watching them, the town saw not scandal, but partnership built on respect. Something healed quietly in that shared moment. After the gathering, they walked home under moonlight. Layla spoke of her fears honestly, of wondering if happiness could last. Caleb answered with equal honesty. He said certainty was not promised, but commitment was. He told her he would choose her daily, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. Layla stopped walking then and faced him. She said she loved him, not as gratitude, not as debt, but as truth. Caleb answered the same, his voice steady, his heart full. Days passed and life continued, but something had settled into place. They planned together now without hesitation. They spoke of building a larger home, of welcoming others, of creating a place where fairness was lived, not just spoken. Lila suggested teaching practical skills to young women who passed through town. Caleb agreed, offering space and support. Their dreams grew outward, touching more than just themselves. Trouble tested them once more when a distant relative of Caleb arrived, questioning the land division he had made earlier. The man carried old expectations and sharp words. Caleb listened, calm and firm. Lila stood beside him, silent but present. Together, they explained their choices. When the man threatened legal action, Caleb did not waver. Lila added her voice, clear and unafraid. Faced with unity and truth, the man left, defeated not by force, but by resolve. That night, Caleb asked Lila to stay at his ranch permanently, not as obligation, but as home. Lila considered carefully, then agreed. They marked the decision quietly, with shared supper and laughter. There was no fear in the choice, only intention. As winter approached again, Red Hollow rested easier. The changes that once shocked it had settled into new norms. Justice had not torn the town apart. It had strengthened it. Caleb and Lila stood as proof that courage and respect could reshape lives without violence or control. One evening, sitting by the fire, Lila reflected on the words she had once spoken, begging him not to act. She told Caleb she was glad he had not listened. Caleb replied that he was glad he had listened to everything else she said. They smiled, understanding the balance they had found. Their story did not end with certainty or perfection. It ended with choice, renewed each day, and with love grounded in freedom. The town slept peacefully that night, unaware it had witnessed the birth of something rare and lasting, shaped not by shock alone, but by what followed after. Winter returned to Red Hollow softly, without the sharp cruelty it once carried. Snow fell in clean lines across the valley, covering old tracks and smoothing the land as if nature itself wished to mark a new beginning. Caleb and Lila faced the season together, not as a spectacle the town watched anymore, but as a steady presence woven into daily life. Their home became a place people trusted. When fences broke, when tempers flared, when choices felt heavy, neighbors came not for judgment, but for counsel. What had once shocked the town had matured into something quieter and far more powerful. Marriage was not announced with fanfare. It came after long conversations, after winter nights spent talking by the fire about fears that still lingered and hopes that now felt possible. Caleb asked only once, and he asked gently. Lila answered with clarity and calm. She said yes because she wanted a life shared, not because she needed one saved. They married in early spring, beneath open sky, with vows spoken plainly. There were no grand promises, only commitments to honesty, respect, and daily choice. The town gathered, not out of curiosity, but out of affection. Red Hollow had learned what kind of love lasted. Their life together was not without struggle. Drought tested crops. Illness visited briefly. Old memories sometimes returned uninvited, but nothing felt unmanageable anymore. When Lila faltered, Caleb did not rush to fix. He stood beside her. When Caleb grew weary, Lila reminded him that strength did not mean carrying everything alone. They built routines that honored both independence and partnership. Each kept their name, their work, their voice. Together, they created more than either could alone. The land thrived under shared stewardship. The schoolroom opened its doors, just as Lila had once imagined. Children learned not only reading and numbers, but fairness and courage through example. Travelers stopped, rested, and often stayed longer than planned. Some never left. Red Hollow grew slowly, thoughtfully, shaped by lessons learned the hard way. People spoke openly now, addressed wrongs sooner, and listened longer. Change had proven it did not have to destroy to be real. Years later, when new families asked about the story that once stunned the town, the answers were simple. A rancher chose justice over comfort. A woman chose herself. The town chose to learn. There were no dramatic retellings, no inflated legends. Just truth passed along like a well-used tool, steady and reliable. On quiet evenings, Caleb and Leela sat on the porch, watching the valley breathe as it always had. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they did not. Both were content. The past no longer held them. The future did not frighten them. What mattered was the present, chosen freely, shared honestly.